Okay, calm down.
It's difficult to live in the last decades of an empire. It will take the American empire probably another half century or so to completely undergo the fundamental implosion and transformation. But it's clear that the dying process is very much in place.
You are an incredibly learned intellectual, public intellectual, also in the, I consider you in the tradition of Gramsci. But as someone who's studied empire and has such a vast encyclopedic breadth of knowledge, what makes you think that this is going to happen, that this shift in empire is going to happen, and what kind of, is it going to be a collapse, a death?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Is it a bang? Is it a whimper? It's very hard to say how empires themselves undergo their own forms of decay and deterioration and death. The United States is the 68th empire in the history of the species. It's been roughly 70. This is from the World Atlas. This is from the Al Ferguson's book and other scholars who have made this point over and over again. So I'm not the first to put this forward. But what is distinctive about the American empire is, one, its claims to innocence, is two, its obsession with dreams. There's been no other empire in the history of the world to move from perceived innocence to corruption without a mediating stage of maturity, because the United States began with a big lie. It said that somehow it was born modern, born capitalist, born bourgeois. No talk about the genocide of indigenous peoples, no talk about slavery, denying class struggle, denying patriarchy in that way. Every empire we know has been shot through with forms of barbarism. Don't get me wrong. The whole species, we human species, we're wretched in that sense. We don't know a moment where it has been structures of domination. There has been forms of organized hatred and weaponized greed, of organized greed, I should say, and weaponized hatred and routinized indifference. But the United States has this city on the hill mentality. So that when James Baldwin says the innocence itself is the crime, if you view yourself as innocent while you're committing violence, and your major myth is the frontier, which is a line between the innocent civilized and the guilty savages, our precious indigenous brothers and sisters, and you get more regeneration through violence, then that's the worst of the country, and that leads directly to Trump. That leads directly to the worst in the nation. Now, the best in the nation is Martin King, Edward Said, Rabbi Heschel, Dorothy Day, Stephen Sondheim, Louis Armstrong, John Coltrane, Harriet Tubman. I can go on and on. Noam Chomsky, Chris Hedges. I can go on and on with the best of the nation. And what we were trying to do, of course, in the campaign was just to reintroduce America to the best of itself. And we did win many hearts and minds and souls. It was hard to gain access. The corporate media itself shot through with its own forms of corruption and accommodation to the unjust status quo, made it very, very difficult for them to focus in that regard. I don't think I had one speech that the American public even heard. I mean, they heard more Cardi B, God bless her soul, than they heard of me in 17 months. Why? Because it's just so difficult to gain access to exposure and visibility. I was blessed to be on one number of wonderful shows, including your own, and some of the corporate media had an openness to interviews with me, but it was no sustained focus on the issues of poverty and mass incarceration and big money in politics and the ecological catastrophe and the escalating nuclear catastrophes with three sites of wars, be it with Russia or with China or in the Middle East and so on. No serious engagement with those issues. And as you know, Sister Katie, I mean, I'm a cracked vessel that comes out of the Black freedom movement. You see, so I look at the world through the lens of those Frantz Fanon called the wretched of the earth, and it begins on the chocolate side with me. And so I always look at the 40% of Black children who live in poverty. I'm concerned about mass incarceration, no serious discussion of it whatsoever. I'm concerned about the form of spiritual decay that is shot through the hearts and minds and souls of Black people, as well as fellow citizens, as well as fellow human beings. And you can see the ways in which when you live in a society in which everybody's for sale, and commodification is ubiquitous, and it's all about, life is gold rush, worshiping the golden calf and transforming the golden rule into he or she who has the gold will rule. Then you're going to get black folk themselves seduced by corruption, seduced by bigotry, seduced by greed. Because these are human beings. We are human beings like everybody else. And the challenge is to try to be that cloud of witnesses to hold up that bloodstained banner. It was the abolitionists in the 19th century that everybody laughed at. It was the freedom fighters in the 1960s. Everybody laughed. Either laughed at them or they shot him down, assassinated him, incarcerated him. That's why Mumia Abu Jamal is still in jail.
Right.
Brother Adriat Brown, Brother Amani Min, Abdullah Al Hamin is still in jail. Leonard Peltier is still in jail. I mean, these are folk who were very much a part of efforts to try to bring light on the forms of barbarism that was shot through the American empire in the 1960s. And it's gotten so much worse now in terms of the corruption. Now, the irony is that we made some progress in terms of inclusion. I don't want to deny that at all. We've made progress as a result of social movements. But what has happened, of course, is that the imperial hierarchy and the class hierarchy has just invited all these different peoples of color and gender and sexual orientation to come in and be included without getting at the structures of the empire, the structures of the predatory capitalist mode of production, or the structures in terms of the ways in which professional classes, so tied to careerism and opportunism, simply make room for the newcomers without fundamentally transforming the structures as the newcomers are on their way in. And so you get these black faces in high places and women faces in high places, gay and lesbian faces in a. Now, our precious trans, I do want to stop and say a word about this because I'm deeply concerned about the way in which they have been so viciously demonized and viciously vilified and so forth. They're human beings like anybody else, so they can make choices of right and wrong. But anytime you have a group that's being viciously vilified like that, and we've seen it in the history of the species with Jews for 2,500 years, terrorized, traumatized. But when they get in positions of power, they can be human like everybody else because they are human. And they have the capacity to terrorize and traumatize too. And if we can't be flexible enough to be concerned about our Jewish brothers and sisters when they're being terrorized and traumatized, but also concerned about our Palestinian brothers and sisters when they're being terrorized and traumatized by Israelis, then something's wrong with our humanity.
Right.
Something's wrong with
And
our solidarity, you see.